Morning, grade 7s. It's Mrs. Nicholas. As you know, we began reading Mending by Robert Frost in our last poetry lesson. In this video, I'm going to break down the poem so that you have a better understanding of the underlying messages and interpretation in the poem. So when we get together, we're all on the same page. Just remember, as in any work of art, whether it be music, poetry, stories, paintings, all of that, it's going to be open into interpretation unless the author specifically comes out and shares what he or she intended with the message in what he or she has drawn or written. It's open to interpretation, and there's going to be many different people analyzing it. So here we go. Mending Wall by Robert Frost. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding, to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean. No one has seen them made or heard them made. So what's going on here? The speaker is telling us something there is that doesn't love a wall. We could look at that as personification. The speaker is personifying possibly a deity or some unknown spirit or some unknown force. Something doesn't want the wall there. Also, another partaker in breaking down the wall is the hunter. The hunters come every year. They're chasing rabbits. They pull out stones to catch the rabbits as the dogs hunt them through the wall, or when the rabbit tries to hide in the wall. So here it says, but at spring mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us again. So every spring, the speaker is going to his neighbor, reminding him that it's time to mend the wall after the winter. And they set the wall between them once again. And he says, we keep the wall between us as we go. To each, the boulders have fallen to each. So that means on each side of the wall, the rocks have fallen. And that could be an example of repetition in poetry, because you're repeating words for emphasis, for impact. And some are loaves and some so nearly balls. There's an example of metaphor. The speaker is comparing the stones in the wall to loaves of bread and balls. So remember, a metaphor is comparing two unlike things, not using like or as. So loaves of bread, stones, he's calling the stone loaves of bread. Loaves of bread. We have to use a spell to make them balance. So it's not an easy task. They have to use a spell to make the stones balance, right? So let's see. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. One on a side, it comes to little more. So that sounds pretty nonchalant. The speaker doesn't seem to be taking this rebuilding of the wall very seriously, if he considers it a game. And now the speaker is giving us a little insight into his thinking about the wall. There where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. So there we have another metaphor. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. The speaker is comparing the neighbor to pine trees and himself to an apple orchard. And then he's also personifying the apple trees by saying, my apples will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. Okay, so it seems that the neighbor doesn't really see a reason for the wall, because he says, they just have apple orchards on one side, pine trees on another. What is the point of the wall? Their word is, we do not need a wall. And then the neighbor says in response, good fences make good neighbors. And the speaker says, spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head, why do they make good neighbors? So that's the question. Why do good fences make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know, what was I walling in or walling out? And whom I was like to give offense? So there's a bit of irony here. Earlier, we found that the speaker said every spring he goes and reminds the neighbor that it's time to rebuild the wall. So if he doesn't even believe they need a wall, why is he going and reminding the neighbor to rebuild it? Seems a little silly. It's hard to understand, but perhaps it is just a game to him, as he did mention. And then he says, something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly. So that part confused a lot of students. Elves, like, where do elves fit in? This seems so random, but it really does fall in line with what the speaker is saying. He's just saying, what could it be? What is it that doesn't love a wall? If every spring they have to remend it. Okay, so it could be, or rebuild it. It could be winter, the spirit of winter, knocking down the wall, the hunters. Elves, well, it's not elves. He wants the neighbor to be able to say for himself that he doesn't want a wall. The speaker doesn't want to have to make something up. So something there is that doesn't love a wall. It could be elves. It's not elves exactly. I'd rather he say it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the hand. In each hand, like an old stone savage armed, he moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only in the shade of trees. So what does that mean? The speaker is comparing his neighbor to a stone savage as he picks up the stones and rebuilds the wall. He says, like an old stone savage armed. So there is a simile, an example of another literary element that we have learned this past week. So the speaker is suggesting that the neighbor moves in darkness, and he says not only of woods in the shade of trees. So he's suggesting that perhaps his neighbor is in an emotional darkness, or he's not evolving, he's not changing, he's not growing, he's stuck and mired down by his old beliefs. And it says here, he will not go beyond his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors. So it seems that the neighbor likes to say good fences make good neighbors because his father said it. So he's not changing or reconsidering his father's point of view. He is just continuing the old cycle of beliefs. So really what it seems to be about is that the speaker is wanting to rebuild the wall with the neighbor, even though the speaker doesn't really want the wall, but he does it for his own entertainment. He puts himself through all that difficult and hard work because he's entertained by the fact that his neighbor actually believes they need the wall when there's nothing to keep in or nothing to keep out. So there is an analysis of the poem. And why might the speaker believe that they don't need a wall? Well, they have nothing to keep in and keep out, but perhaps he actually wants to build a relationship with his neighbor. Perhaps he feels their relationship could actually grow, but it's not. The only time they talk or interact is when they're rebuilding the wall. Anyway, there's a little breakdown of the poem, and we will continue to talk about it when you come back to class. Thanks. Have a great day.